Hi, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Quentin.
And we're the Brothers O'Toole. Our first project will be the revival of this Yamaha Rhino.
Ta-da!
With a bad engine, and now we're going to revive it.
Hi, I'm the old man of the Brothers O'Toole, and we're going to try to figure out how to get this Rhino running again. Don't know anything in particular about rhinos, but we're going to figure it out as we go.
So for the end of day one, we weren't able to do that much, just a lot of fooling around with the skid plates. So hopefully tomorrow we'll be able to drain the fluids. So it's the beginning of day two now. Last night we were able to get these off.
Get the skid plates off, a lot of rusty old screws, so it took a while, and Quentin had to go in and do homework. So Andrew and I did that, and then it was bedtime.
Today we're hoping to drain the fluids from the engine so we can start taking it out.
Drain the cooling system, drain it at the water pump, which is at the bottom of the vehicle, relatively close to the oil drain plug, but this will be the cooling system drain and the lowest point on the engine. It's an 8mm socket. So here it goes. And we'll probably need to open the radiator cap to let it breathe.
And there it goes.
It should be spraying out, so I'm going to open the radiator cap. Or remove the radiator cap.
There it goes.
Now that the cooling system's drained, I'm going to put the plug back in so we don't lose it. Move the pan out of the way and then drain the oil. Oil drain's going to take a 17mm socket. And here's the location of the drain plug. Now we're going to drain the motor oil on this 2004 Rhino 660. Here's the drain plug, 17mm socket, and righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, and it is tight. Here we go. Be curious to see what this looks like, if there's any metal in it from presumably the bad bearing, connecting rod bearing, or main bearings. I assume it's connecting rod bearing. Plenty black. I assume that is the cause of the rod bearing going out.
Isn't oil normally black?
Shouldn't be this black. These engines are sensitive to oil level, having the proper oil level, and relatively fresh oil. We'll be running synthetic oil in here to help with the lubrication and cooling.
And then you're gonna put it back in now?
Yes. Put the plug back in just since we got most of the oil out. Okay. Move the cooling lines coming from the radiator. There's one down here lower, spring clamp right by the water pump, but I'm going to take off this hose clamp. The spring clamp, I don't really like dealing with those too much, and this is a little better position, so, or so I thought. And then we'll be taking these two oil lines off along with this other cooling line, and then that should take care of the fluid lines going to the engine, but we still have plenty more work to do.
going to go underneath and put the pan under it, and pull that hose off. Pull the hose back. Silver cap there in front. Find it? For the other cooling line that's coming off the cylinder head, gonna compress this hose clamp. I think what I'll do is, and it'll be where we need it when we reassemble it. So, cooling lines are disconnected. Now I'll come over to that side and disconnect the oil line. So we just drained the cooling system. Pretty much looks like a radiator on a car or a truck, only smaller. And removed the hoses at the engine to allow all the coolant to drain out. Now we're going to go to the oil cooler, which is important. Even though this engine's liquid cooled, it has an auxiliary oil cooler. So follow these two lines back to the engine and disconnect those at the engine. We've already drained the oil, so there shouldn't be too much of a mess, but I expect there will be some out of this oil cooler. Okay, now we're going to remove the oil cooler lines so the engine will be free. Got two screw clamps here. I think those are 6mm, pretty close to 1/4 inch, but 1/4 inch is a little big. Have the drain pan underneath because even though I've drained the crankcase, there's still probably going to be oil high up at this point. We aren't at the high point and we aren't at the low point, so I'm expecting to see oil, and it's going to hit the drain. And here comes the oil. Not too much. Yeah, I really think the issue with this engine was poor oil quality. Probably oil should have been changed more frequently. This is pretty well used up oil. Okay, so now we've got the cooling lines disconnected and the oil cooler lines. So antifreeze, engine cooling lines, and now the oil cooler lines. So we'll take a look at what we're going to do next. Loosen the differential mounting bolts. From the research I did and most of the forums, it says remove the 3 bolts that hold the differential in place, let it drop down and roll it forward, and that will disconnect the drive shaft from the engine. Right now I'm only finding 2 bolts. This is an 04 Rhino, and maybe they added a 3rd bolt, or we'll discover it when we get that far. But again, at 14mm, air-powered tools rather than electric. I don't have cordless tools, which are very nice, but too expensive for the frugal old man. So I'm going to just take the nut off and get the other bolt out that's near the back, but let this bolt roughly hold it in place so it doesn't totally drop down. So I'm going to need to get underneath and get to the other bolt. Okay, I found the 2nd bolt, and I think I understand. So there's 1 through bolt across the front with a nut, and then 2 screws on each side. This happens to be the passenger side that I'm going to loosen. I don't have my greatest selection of tools here, but coming apart easily. It's sort of a good exercise to try to take it apart with what you've got, and then you can figure out what the better tools are for the future. It's coming out easily, and I'm going to have to, as soon as I get this one out, crawl back underneath. I put a combination wrench on it
thinking that there'd be a nut on this side, but apparently not. So, time for me to get underneath. Here's the rearward bolt on the driver's side. And it is tight enough. I need to get a pipe on this for some leverage. Broke that bolt free with the cheater bar, cheater pipe. So this is the third bolt in the differential. As I said, there's two rearward bolts or truly screws since they don't have nuts, and then the through bolt at the front. After I take this bolt out, I'll pull out the through bolt at the front and then allow the differential to drop down, and then I can roll it forward, and that is supposed to remove the drive shaft from the engine. So I'm pulling out the cross bolt for the differential, and the idea is that it should drop down and be able to roll forward. Don't have my favorite pry bar here, so I'm going to use this bolt without damaging the threads, and use the ratchet handle to free it from the brackets. Now we need to get back underneath, and we're going to remove the 4 motor mount nuts from the frame and possibly loosen the screws that attach the motor mounts to the engine. Okay, now we've got 4 motor mount screws or nuts to actually remove. 2 in the front, appears 2 in the back, and then we considering that this Rhino is 16 years old, has 600 hours on it, but, well, I guess now that I think of it, this was all covered with the skid plate, but even other areas that weren't, doesn't look like it's, so, one more. And I think since these studs, front studs are pointing forward, the rear studs are pointing rearward, they aren't parallel, so I don't know how easily it will lift out unless we do loosen the brackets. But that takes care of the 4 motor mount nuts. And now we'll figure out what we're going to do next. I remove the carburetor and lay it off to the side. That was part of the recommended procedure. This is pretty nice. I've never ran across Allen screws in the carburetor intake boot or the intake manifold. And this one is down here. 4mm Allen wrench. Make sure these clamps are loose and can spin around. That one's loose. This one's still has a little bit of tension. See how far it can get without needing to disconnect the throttle cable, maybe not the fuel line. Everything's bundled up through here, so may be able to just get it out of our way. We've got fuel line here. That apparently wants to hold it up.
throttle cable looks like. Okay, actually this is the choke cable. Throttle cable, I think. Now we're getting somewhere. I'm gonna remove the choke cable, or actually the enrichment plunger. Surprised that's so loose. Pull that out. When you pull the choke, actually it's lifting this plunger to allow more fuel to flow and enrich the mixture. So, been called choke forever, but sometimes it's called the enrichment plunger. Technically, it's the enrichment plunger. So, there we are with that. And I think that's what we'll call it complete for tonight. So this is the end of night 2. We only get to work on it an hour or 2 each night. The boys had taekwondo before that, so I don't think we got out here until almost 7 o'clock. And now it's 8 o'clock, bedtime. But tonight was a little more productive. Got all the fluids drained, oil and coolant. Got the differential loosened up. And we have the motor mount nuts removed and just removed the carburetor. So tomorrow night, I think well, obviously we're going to be closer to being able to lift the engine out of here. Do a little more research and get ready for tomorrow night. So, from the brothers O'Toole,
Andrew,
And Quentin.
and the old man, we'll see you tomorrow.